The two pink lines on the test strip were as stark and unforgiving as the lightning that split the Port Bellamy sky. Alara Vance, a woman whose life was a testament to meticulous planning and an iron will, stood frozen in her opulent bathroom, the small plastic stick trembling in her perfectly manicured fingers. 35 years old, a celebrated defense attorney who'd never lost her composure, not even in the most brutal courtroom showdowns. And now this, a baby. Her meticulously constructed world tilted on its axis, a shiver of something akin to joy, terrified, exhilarating joy, running through her. But how could this be happening now? The storm outside mirrored the tempest brewing within her. Thunder, a percussive growl, rolled across Port Bellamy's historic district, rattling the antique windows of her renovated Victorian home. Wild, unpredictable, intense, just like the thoughts now stampeding through her mind. This wasn't in the plan. The plan was clear: continue her ascent through Port Bellamy's legal echelons, nurture her 12-year marriage to Marcus Thorne, perhaps consider children in a year or two, when things were calmer. But this beautiful, terrifying accident made her feel like a novice all over again, every certainty she'd ever clung to dissolving like sugar in the rain. She caught her reflection. Dark hair, a cascade of waves past her shoulders. Olive skin, usually glowing, now shadowed by the storm's eerie light. Her brown eyes, wide with a potent cocktail of joy and sheer terror. The classic black pencil skirt and silk blouse she'd worn to court earlier still looked impeccable, a stark, almost cruel contrast to the emotional hurricane raging inside. Deep breaths, Alara. Deep breaths. A habit from years of yoga, a practice that now seemed a lifetime away. The familiar, usually comforting scent of midnight bloom. Her dear friend Serafina Dubois's signature perfume creation, a scent that always grounded her, suddenly felt suffocating, cloying. Her Scorpio instincts, those gut feelings she'd learned to trust implicitly, were screaming. This moment, this was pivotal. There would be no going back. Her fingers, still unsteady, reached for her phone, hovering over Marcus's number. He was in Oakhaven for a business meeting, or so he'd said. Lately, his business trips had become more frequent, his kisses more distracted, his presence more like an absence, a ghost in their carefully curated life. But surely this news, this incredible, life-altering news, would bring him back? Bring back the man she'd fallen in love with? The one who used to leave silly, romantic notes in her briefcase and dance with her in their sun-drenched kitchen on lazy Sunday mornings? Could this baby mend the fissures that had been silently cracking the foundations of their marriage? The call connected on the third ring. Marcus? Her voice was a mere whisper, softer than she'd intended. "Alara, hold on a sec," he said, his tone preoccupied, distant. Papers shuffled in the background. Normal, too normal. And then, something that wasn't. A woman's laugh. Low, intimate, and chillingly close. It coiled around Alara's heart, squeezing the air from her lungs. It was followed by words spoken in a sultry, confident tone that would forever be seared into Alara's memory. Words that shattered her world into a million jagged pieces. "She'll never know, Marcus." Izzy Monet. The name, though unknown to Alara then, would soon become synonymous with a betrayal so profound it would redefine her existence. Marcus's breath hitched. A tiny, almost imperceptible sound, but to Alara, a lawyer trained to catch every nuance, every flicker of deception, it was a confession louder than any shouted words. The phone nearly slipped from her grasp. Her legal mind, a finely honed weapon, kicked into overdrive, analyzing, dissecting. That laugh, those words, the way Marcus's breath had caught. The pieces slammed together with brutal, undeniable clarity. Betrayal. The word echoed in the sudden, deafening silence of her mind. It was a cold, hard, undeniable fact. Without conscious thought, Alara found herself moving. A primal rage, cold and sharp, surged through her veins, eclipsing the earlier shock of the pregnancy. Her hand, no longer trembling but clenched with a desperate strength, grabbed her animal print trench coat from the hook. Her feet, almost of their own accord, slipped into leather boots. Her fingers curled around her car keys, the metal biting into her palm. The rational part of her brain, the part that had won countless legal battles, screamed at her. Driving in this weather was insane. Confrontation could wait. She needed to think. She needed to think of the baby, the tiny, innocent life now growing inside her, a life conceived in love, or so she had believed. But Alara Vance had never backed down from a fight. Not once. And this was a fight for her very soul. The streets of Port Bellamy were slick with rain, the historic cobblestones treacherous beneath her tires. The windshield wipers fought a losing battle against the relentless downpour, each sweep a futile attempt to clear her vision, both literal and metaphorical. Her mind raced, a frantic, chaotic blur of questions. How long had this betrayal been going on? Who was she, this woman with the intimate laugh? What had Alara missed? How could she have been so blind? The Mariner's Rest Hotel loomed ahead, its elegant facade a grotesque mockery in the stormy night, its windows glowing like accusatory eyes through the deluge. She spotted Marcus's car, a sleek, black sedan she'd gifted him for their 10th anniversary, parked brazenly near the entrance. The sight was another stab to her already bleeding heart. She parked haphazardly, her usual precision, her hallmark in every aspect of her life, utterly abandoned. The emergency stairs felt endless, each metallic clang of her boots on the steps echoing the thunder raging outside and the war drum rhythm pounding against her ribs. 4th floor. He'd mentioned a client meeting on the 4th floor of some hotel in Oakhaven, another lie in a tapestry of deceit. And there, through a rain-streaked window at the end of a dimly lit corridor, she saw them. Marcus. Her Marcus. Holding another woman in his arms. His suit jacket was draped carelessly over a nearby chair, his tie loosened, his normally immaculate appearance rumpled with an intimacy that made Alara's stomach churn. The woman was younger, blonde, beautiful in that effortless, almost insolent way that made Alara's own carefully maintained composure feel like a brittle, cracking mask. And his wedding ring, the simple gold band Alara had slipped onto his finger 12 years ago, glinted mockingly in the room's warm, inviting light. The scene was a devastating tableau of treachery, each detail a fresh twist of the knife. She could almost smell the cloying sweetness of a perfume she'd later identify as ephemeral, by Monet, a scent that would forever be linked to this moment of ultimate heartbreak. The world tilted, the corridor swaying beneath her feet. The pregnancy test, still clutched in her coat pocket, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds, a leaden symbol of a future that had just been violently rewritten. 12 years of marriage, countless shared dreams, one perfect, soul-destroying lie, all unraveling in a single, catastrophic moment. Olivia stumbled back, her legal training, her carefully constructed walls, her very identity crumbling around her. The rain, relentless and unforgiving, soaked through her expensive trench coat as she ran blindly back to her car. Mascara, the waterproof kind she favored for long days in court, traced black rivers down her cheeks, mingling with the rain and her tears. The engine roared to life under her shaking hands. She had to get away. Away from him, away from her, away from the suffocating weight of his betrayal. She never saw the truck. One moment, she was speeding through the storm-lashed streets of Port Bellamy, her heart a shattered wreck. The next, there was a blinding flash of headlights, the deafening screech of metal tearing against metal, the explosive sound of glass shattering into a million diamond-like shards. The world spun in a dizzying, terrifying kaleidoscope of rain and broken dreams. Her last conscious thought wasn't of Marcus, or the baby, or even her own survival. It was of the raging storm inside her heart, a storm that had finally, devastatingly, broken free, plunging her into an abyss of cold, silent darkness. The silence was the most terrifying part, a void where only moments before her life had been screaming. That crushing silence of the void, the one that had swallowed Alara Vance whole after the sickening crunch of metal and the explosive symphony of shattering glass, gave way, slowly, agonizingly, to a relentless, rhythmic beeping. It was a sound that seemed to pierce through layers of suffocating darkness, dragging her back to a world she wasn't entirely sure she wanted to rejoin. Each beep was a hammer blow against her skull. Where was she? What had happened? Her eyelids felt like lead weights, a struggle to lift. When she finally managed, the world swam into a blurry, disorienting focus. Fluorescent lights, cold and unforgiving, hummed above, casting harsh shadows on the sterile white walls. The scent of antiseptic, sharp and clean, stung her nostrils, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of blood she vaguely remembered. A hospital. Definitely a hospital. Pain, a dull, throbbing ache, radiated through her neck, her ribs, her very bones. She tried to nod, a tiny movement, but a fresh wave of agony shot through her. Her throat felt raw, as if she'd swallowed broken glass. "Mrs. Vance, can you hear me?" A gentle voice cut through the haze. Alara blinked, trying to bring the speaker into focus. A woman in a white coat stood beside her bed, a clipboard in hand. Her name tag read, Dr. Eris Thorne. Thorne. The name snagged in Alara's muddled brain, a tiny, dissonant chord in the cacophony of her confusion. Marcus's last name. Coincidence? Or something more sinister? In Port Bellamy's interconnected elite circles, could it be anything but a connection? A cold flicker of unease, sharp and unwelcome, pierced through the fog of pain and medication. This was a detail her lawyer's mind, even in its battered state, wouldn't easily dismiss. Dr. Thorne's face, kind yet professional, showed a mixture of concern and cautious optimism. "You've been unconscious for nearly 24 hours, Alara. You were in a nasty accident. You suffered a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and multiple contusions." She paused, her gaze softening slightly. "You're very lucky. It could have been much, much worse." Lucky? The word felt like a cruel joke. Lucky to be alive after discovering her entire marriage was a sham? Lucky to be lying here, broken and battered, while Marcus was where? With her? And then, the most important question, the one that clawed its way to the forefront of her thoughts, eclipsing even the throbbing pain. "The baby," Alara croaked, her voice raspy, barely a whisper. Her hand, shaking, instinctively moved to her stomach, a protective gesture over the life she'd only just begun to acknowledge. "My baby?" Dr. Eris Thorne's expression softened further, a genuine warmth touching her eyes. "The pregnancy is still viable, Alara. But," she added, her tone becoming serious, "the next few weeks will be critical. The trauma from the accident has put you at high risk for complications. You'll need complete bed rest and careful monitoring." Relief, so potent it was almost painful, washed over Alara, followed immediately by a fresh wave of fear. Viable, for now. But complications? As a lawyer, she knew how quickly viable could become irreversible. This tiny, precious life, her only anchor in this maelstrom of betrayal and despair, was hanging by a thread. How could she protect it when her own world had been so utterly demolished? Just then, the door to her private room swished open, and Serafina Sarah Dubois swept in, a vision of calm and strength. Tall, elegant, with an air of quiet authority that always seemed to command respect, Sarah was more than just Alara's closest friend. She was her rock, her confidant, her chosen sister. Dressed in one of her signature flowing maxi dresses, earthy tones of zaigie, the subtle, bespoke scent of midnight bloom, Sarah's own perfume creation, a complex blend of night-blooming jasmine, dark vetiver, and a hint of something wild and resilient, drifted into the sterile room, somehow making the oppressive space feel more human, more bearable. Was it possible for a scent to embody resilience? If so, Midnight Bloom was it. Sarah's dark eyes, usually sparkling with warmth and humor, were now filled with a deep, unwavering concern as she took in Alara's battered form. She didn't fuss, didn't offer platitudes. She simply moved to Alara's bedside, her presence a silent promise of unwavering support, a human shield against the horrors that lay in wait. The peace, however, was short-lived. The door burst open again, this time with a force that rattled the frame. Marcus Thorne. He looked a wreck, his designer suit wrinkled, his usually perfectly styled sandy hair unkempt, his green eyes, those eyes Alara had once found so captivating, now wild with what looked like genuine concern. But was it genuine? Or just another performance in their long-running play of a marriage? The sight of him, the man who had shattered her world, made Alara's stomach churn with a potent mix of rage and disgust. "Alara! Oh God, Alara!" he exclaimed, rushing towards her, his hand outstretched as if to take hers. Alara recoiled, a sharp, involuntary movement that sent a fresh jolt of pain through her bruised ribs. The heart monitor beside her bed spiked, its steady beeping becoming more erratic, more frantic. "Don't," she hissed, her voice, though weak, laced with all the venom a Scorpio could muster. "Don't you dare touch me." Each word was a shard of ice. There was no room for his feigned concern, not now, not ever again. Marcus stopped short, his face a mask of, what? Shock? Hurt? Or just annoyance at being denied his role as the grieving husband? It was impossible to tell. And frankly, Alara didn't care. Dr. Eris Thorne, sensing the explosive tension in the room, stepped forward. "Mr. Thorne," she said, her voice calm but firm, "perhaps we should give your wife some space. She needs to rest." Space? Marcus's voice cracked, a raw, desperate edge to it. She's carrying my child. I have a right to be here. His child. The audacity of it. The words hit Alara like another car crash, stealing the breath from her lungs. How dare he? How dare he claim rights to anything, to anyone, after what he'd done? After the betrayal she'd witnessed with her own eyes, she wanted to scream, to rage, to throw something, anything, to make him feel even a fraction of the pain that was tearing through her heart, shredding her soul. But her body, broken and weak, refused to cooperate. It was a prison of its own, trapping her fury within. As if summoned by the escalating drama, another figure appeared in the doorway, hovering anxiously just outside the room. Izzy Monet. Still wearing the clothes from the night before, the night she'd spent in Marcus's arms, her blonde hair artfully tousled, her youthful beauty a stark contrast to Alara's own ravaged appearance. The cloying, sweet scent of her perfume, Ephemeral by Monet, wafted into the room, a sickeningly intimate reminder of the betrayal. The sight of her, so brazen, so unashamed, made Alara's vision blur with tears of pure, unadulterated rage. This was the woman Marcus had chosen over her, over their vows, over their life together. Both of you, Alara managed, her voice trembling but gaining a steely resolve, each word forced through clenched teeth. Get out. Alara, please, Marcus began, his voice pleading. Out. The force of her shout sent daggers of pain radiating through her ribs, but she didn't care. The release was almost worth it. The heart monitor shrieked in protest, its beeping becoming a frantic, panicked alarm. Dr. Thorne stepped in again, her authority unwavering. Everyone except Miss Dubois needs to leave. Now. Marcus hesitated, his gaze flicking between Alara and the doctor. For a moment it looked as though he might argue, might assert his supposed rights again. But something in Dr. Thorne's steady, no-nonsense gaze, or perhaps the sheer, unyielding fury in Alara's eyes, made him back down. Slowly, reluctantly, he backed away from the bed. In the hallway, Madison reached for his hand, a small, possessive gesture that felt like another knife twisting in Alara's already gaping wound. The two of them, the united front of deceit. It was almost comical. If it wasn't so devastating. Once they were gone, a blessed, profound silence descended upon the room, broken only by the gradually steadying rhythm of the heart monitor and Alara's ragged breathing. The storm outside had momentarily abated, but the one inside Alara still raged. Sarah pulled a chair close to the bed, her presence as soothing as the pain medication now flowing through Alara's IV. She took Alara's hand, her touch gentle but firm. "You don't have to be strong right now, Alara," she said softly, her voice a balm to Alara's raw nerves. "You just have to breathe." And finally, in the safety of her friend's unwavering presence, Alara Vance, the formidable defense attorney, the woman who never cracked under pressure, let the tears come. They weren't the elegant, restrained tears of a woman wronged. They were ugly, racking sobs that shook her broken body, a torrent of grief and rage and despair that she had held back for far too long. She cried for her marriage, a 12-year illusion. She cried for her baby, an innocent life thrust into this chaos. She cried for the life she thought she had, the future she had so meticulously planned, now reduced to ashes. And she cried for the terrifyingly uncertain future stretching before her like a dark, desolate road on a stormy night. "What am I going to do, Sarah?" she whispered, the words a broken plea more to herself than to her friend. How do I even begin to pick up the pieces?" Sarah held her hand tighter. "Right now," she said, her voice imbued with a quiet certainty, "you're going to heal. And then, my friend, then you're going to rise." A week later, the autumn sun cast long, mournful shadows across Alara's private hospital room. It felt like an eternity to someone who lived by the relentless ticking clock of courtroom deadlines and case files. Her body was healing, albeit slower than her fierce pride would have liked. Her laptop sat unopened on the side table, a reluctant concession to Dr. Eris Thorne's stern warnings about stress and its detrimental effects on her precarious pregnancy. Each day was a battle, a fight to reclaim some semblance of control in a life that had spun so violently off its axis. What choices did she even have left? Could she trust anyone? Especially a doctor with that name? The morning brought an unexpected visitor, a jolt to the monotonous rhythm of her recovery. Julian Frost. Her fiercest courtroom rival, the prosecuting attorney who had given her more than a few sleepless nights, strode into her room, his presence filling the sterile space with an energy that was both unsettling and intriguing. He looked different outside their usual adversarial arena, more human, less a legal machine. Dressed in dark jeans and a casual blazer that somehow made him look even more formidable, he was a stark contrast to the hushed, sterile environment of the hospital. Alara, instantly self-conscious of her tangled hair and drab hospital gown, felt a flush creep up her neck. "Counselor Vance," he said, a slight, almost imperceptible smirk playing on his lips. His honey-colored eyes, usually sharp with legal cunning, held a surprisingly softer light today. "I object to your current venue selection. Surely the esteemed Alara Vance deserves more panache?" Despite herself, despite the pain and the anger and the gnawing uncertainty, Alara felt the corner of her lips twitch, the ghost of a smile. "Overruled, Counselor Frost," she managed, her voice still raspy. "I have medical precedent." His gaze softened further as he took in her bruised face, the fading yellow and purple shadows a testament to her ordeal, and the array of monitors surrounding her bed, their steady beeps a constant reminder of her fragility. He placed a paper cup of what smelled like premium, non-hospital coffee on her bedside table, just out of reach. "For when you're allowed caffeine again," he said. "Consider it a standing order. Can't have Port Bellamy's finest legal mind operating at less than peak performance, can we?" Alara shifted carefully, wincing, as a sharp pain shot through her ribs. "You didn't come here just to tease me with forbidden coffee, Julian. What's the real reason for this? Unexpected visit? Come to gloat over my current, rather undignified state?" "News travels fast in Port Bellamy legal circles, Alara," he said, settling into the uncomfortable visitor's chair, his athletic frame making the standard-issue hospital furniture seem even smaller and more inadequate. Word is, Marcus has been making some rather interesting financial moves at his company lately." He leaned forward, his expression suddenly serious, the earlier lightness gone. "Large transfers, unusual patterns, the kind of thing that makes the SEC nervous." Alara's legal mind, though dulled by medication and trauma, snapped to attention. The Securities and Exchange Commission? What on earth could Marcus have done to attract their attention? Her heart clenched at the mention of his name, a fresh wave of betrayal washing over her. How do you know this?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. Julian held up a discreet, slim, almost anemic-looking manila file. "Let's just say I have friends in the federal prosecutor's office who owe me a few favors. And they've been observing Thorne Industries for a while now." He met her gaze, his honey-colored eyes intense. "Alara, if he's been moving money around to support extracurricular activities," he paused, the implication hanging heavy in the air, "you need to protect yourself, both legally and financially. And you need to do it now." He placed the file on the bed beside her, its innocuous appearance belying the potential devastation it contained. "Just some light reading for when you're up to it," he said, his voice gentle but firm. "Might explain a few things." He stood, pausing at the door. "Heal fast, Counselor. Port Bellamy needs you back in the ring." And with that, Julian Frost was gone, leaving Alara alone with a cup of forbidden coffee, a throbbing headache, and a slim manila file that felt heavier than any legal brief she had ever held. A new storm, she suspected, was just beginning to gather on the horizon. And this one, she had a sickening feeling, might be even more destructive than the last. What secrets lay within those pages? And what would they mean for her baby, for the ruins of her life? The questions swirled, a vortex of dread and a strange, unwelcome flicker of anticipation. The cheap hospital coffee, the kind that tasted more like ash and regret than actual beans, was a bitter contrast to the contents of Julian Frost's slim manila file. That file, now clutched in Alara's hand as she sat propped against the pillows in her own bed, back in the grand Port Bellamy Victorian home she and Marcus had painstakingly renovated, burned with a far more potent heat. The house, once a symbol of their shared dreams and ambitions, now felt like a mausoleum. Each carefully chosen antique, each perfectly hung artwork, a mocking testament to a life that had been a meticulously crafted lie. How many lies had Marcus told within these very walls? Had any of it been real? Sarah Dubois, a comforting presence in her indigo flowing dress, sat beside her on the edge of the massive four-poster bed. The guest room, always perfectly made up, was now Sarah's temporary sanctuary within Alara's crumbling world. Together, they pored over the documents Julian had so casually, yet so deliberately, left behind. Alara's fingers, still bearing the faint yellow bruises from the IV, traced the columns of figures, her legal mind, sharp as ever despite the trauma, dissecting the information with chilling precision. Systematic fund transfers. Large sums siphoned from Marcus Thorne's company, Thorne Industries, into a series of opaque offshore accounts. And the dates. Oh, the dates. Each transfer, each meticulously documented transaction, coincided perfectly with one of Marcus's increasingly frequent business trips to Oakhaven or some other equally vague destination. The implication was as clear as it was devastating. Marcus hadn't just been betraying her with Izzy Monet, he'd been stealing to fund their affair, to finance a lifestyle Alara hadn't even known existed. Was this what those hushed phone calls and late nights at the office had really been about? This sordid financial mess? A cold fury, sharper and more focused than the raw grief that had consumed her in the hospital, began to solidify in Alara's heart. This wasn't just about a broken marriage anymore. This was about fraud. This was about a level of deception that even she, a seasoned defense attorney who'd seen the darkest sides of human nature, found staggering. How could she have missed this? She, Alara Vance, the woman who prided herself on her intellect, her intuition, her ability to read people. Had love made her so blind, or had Marcus simply been that adept a liar? The questions gnawed at her, each one a fresh insult to her intelligence, her pride. The doorbell, a shrill, unwelcome intrusion, shattered the tense silence. Alara's heart stuttered. Marcus? Had he dared to show his face here again? Sarah, ever protective, rose. "I'll get it," she said, her voice calm but firm. But it wasn't Marcus. It was Gideon Blackwood, Marcus's divorce attorney, a man whose reptilian smile and Savile Row suits always made Alara feel like she needed a shower. He carried a thick, expensive-looking envelope, his demeanor exuding the smooth, predatory confidence of a shark that had just scented blood in the water. Unbelievable. Could Marcus truly be this crass? This cruel? "Mrs. Thorne," Blackwood began, his voice like oiled silk, pointedly ignoring Sarah's formidable presence. He probably thought he could intimidate her, a grieving wife, too broken to fight. He clearly didn't know Alara Vance. "I have some papers here that require your immediate attention. Mr. Thorne is prepared to be extraordinarily generous in the divorce settlement." He slid the envelope onto the antique mahogany table in the foyer. "Provided, of course, certain conditions are met. A quick, quiet resolution. No fuss, no muss. I'm sure you understand." The unspoken condition hung heavy in the air. Silence. Her silence, bought and paid for. Just then, another, more welcome figure appeared in the open doorway. Julian Frost. He'd timed his arrival with uncanny precision, a cup of premium coffee, the real stuff this time, in his hand. "Just checking on my investment," he said, his eyes twinkling as he nodded towards the coffee, then taking in Blackwood with a look of mild disdain. "Blackwood, didn't expect to see you slumming it outside the hallowed halls of corporate litigation." The air crackled with unspoken animosity, two legal titans circling each other. Alara, bolstered by Julian's unexpected but incredibly timely arrival, felt a surge of her old fire. She pushed herself up straighter, the pain in her ribs a dull ache compared to the burning indignation in her chest. "Generous, Mr. Blackwood," she said, her voice dripping ice. "Is that what Marcus is calling it, or is it hush money?" Blackwood's practiced smile faltered just for a second. "Mrs. Thorne, I assure you." "Don't bother," Alara cut him off. She looked at Julian, then back at Blackwood, her gaze unwavering. "Get out, Mr. Blackwood, and you can tell Marcus Thorne that if he wants to push this, I will push back. Harder. I may be in recovery, but I'm still one of the best damned defense attorneys in Port Bellamy. And I will not be silenced." Her voice, though not loud, resonated with a power that made Gideon Blackwood visibly recoil. He was a man used to dealing with victims, not warriors. He stammered something about her being unreasonable, about her condition. "My condition?" Alara's eyes flashed. The monitors in the hospital had beeped faster with less provocation. "You mean the condition I'm in because I discovered your client's infidelity? Or perhaps you're referring to my pregnancy with his child, a child he seems so keen to claim rights to when it suits his narrative? Julian stepped forward, using his height to his full advantage as he faced Blackwood. I believe Mrs. Vance has made her position clear, Blackwood. Any further legal discussions will go through proper channels, when she's ready, which I can assure you will not be when she's being ambushed in her own home. Blackwood, clearly outmaneuvered and shaken, sputtered. Mr. Frost, this is a private matter. No, Alara cut in, her Scorpio determination flaring, hot and fierce. Julian stays. You leave. She gestured towards the door with a dismissive wave of her hand. The gesture was pure Alara Vance, courtroom commanding. After Blackwood's stiff, indignant departure, a wave of exhaustion crashed over Alara. She sank back against the plush cushions of the armchair by the window, her body reminding her that she wasn't nearly as strong as she wanted to be. Julian watched her, his expression a mixture of concern and something akin to admiration. You need to rest, Alara. What I need, she said, pressing her hands against her throbbing temples, fighting back a fresh wave of tears, is to understand what in God's name is happening to my life. Every time I think I've hit bottom, there's another damn trapdoor. Then build a foundation they can't shake, Julian said, his voice holding no pity, only a profound, almost startling respect. You're Alara Vance. I've seen you reduce seasoned witnesses to quivering confessions with a single, perfectly timed question. You've beaten me in court more times than I care to admit. He paused, his honey-colored eyes meeting hers. Whatever Marcus has done, whatever he's hiding, you're stronger, Alara. Don't ever forget that. His words, devoid of sentimentality but rich with genuine belief, stirred something deep within her. Not romance, not yet, but perhaps the first faint glimpse of a future where she wasn't defined by Marcus Thorne's betrayal. A future where she could stand on her own, not as a victim, but as a survivor, a fighter. She looked at the untouched cup of premium coffee Julian had brought, a small wry smile playing on her lips. You know I still can't drink that, right? I know, he said, his own smile answering hers. But you will, eventually. He headed for the door, then paused in the frame. And when you do, Alara, I'll be here to buy you another one. Later that week, Alara had her first therapy session. With Sarah, it turned out her fiercely loyal friend, the creator of bespoke perfumes and a connoisseur of fine art, was also a qualified therapist, specializing in trauma and recovery. Another layer to the complex, fascinating woman Alara was so lucky to call her friend. The session took place in Sarah's own serene, earth-toned office, a sanctuary filled with the subtle scent of vanilla and sandalwood, a world away from the sterile confines of the hospital or the ghost-filled rooms of Alara's home. Tell me about the moment you knew, Sarah began, her voice calm and gentle, her notepad balanced on her knee. She wasn't wearing her usual flowing dresses today, but a structured blazer over silk pants, as if she'd armored herself for this particular battle alongside Alara. Not when you saw them at the Mariner's Rest, Alara, but when you first felt something was wrong. Alara's hand absently traced patterns on her still flat stomach, where her baby, their baby, was growing, a tiny, innocent spark of life caught in this devastating crossfire. 3 months ago, she began, her voice hesitant, we were at the Crimson Heron celebrating my win on the Henderson case. Marcus got a text, and his whole demeanor, it just changed. He said it was work, but... She swallowed hard, the memory a bitter pill. He left dinner early, said he had an urgent deadline. When he came home that night, hours later, he smelled of her perfume. Ephemeral, I know that now. And you didn't confront him then? Sarah asked, her gaze steady, non-judgmental. A bitter laugh escaped Alara. I told myself I was being paranoid, that my Scorpio instincts were just making me see threats where there weren't any. That after 12 years, a little distance, a little distraction, was normal. She shook her head, the irony not lost on her. Turns out, those instincts were screaming at me, trying to protect me all along, and I didn't want to listen. What a fool she'd been. What an absolute trusting fool. Sarah made a note. You keep mentioning your zodiac sign, Alara. Is that a way of understanding yourself, or perhaps a way of justifying your actions or inaction? The question, though gently posed, hit harder than Alara expected. Was she using it as a shield, a convenient label? Before she could formulate an answer, her phone buzzed. An email from her law firm's managing partner, old Henderson himself. This one was more direct, less couched in polite corporate speak. Alara, your continued absence is becoming problematic. Several of your key cases are being reassigned. We need to discuss your future with the partnership at your earliest convenience. They're not even trying to hide it anymore, Alara said, her voice flat, showing Sarah the message. 12 years of loyalty, of bringing in millions in billable hours, of winning impossible cases, and they're pushing me out. Because I'm inconvenient. Because her personal life had dared to implode in such a spectacular public fashion. Are you, Alara? Sarah's question was gentle, yet pointed. Inconvenient? Or are you perhaps finally becoming inconvenient to people who benefited for a very long time from your convenience? The question hung in the air, sharp and unsettling. Just then, the door to Sarah's office opened and Julian Frost entered, right on schedule. He carried a laptop and another stack of files, his handsome face grim with purpose. The energy in the room shifted, became charged with the weight of what was to come. Sorry to interrupt, he said, though they'd planned this timing. But you both need to see this. Now. Sarah nodded, seamlessly shifting from therapist to ally. Show us, Julian. He opened his laptop, pulling up a series of financial records that made Alara's legal mind, her core identity, snap to attention, overriding her emotional exhaustion. Marcus hasn't just been systematically moving company money through shell corporations, Julian explained, his voice low and serious. On paper, it looks like legitimate business expenses. But look at the dates. Each transfer coincided with one of his infamous business trips over the past 6 months. Alara leaned forward, her eyes scanning the complex spreadsheets, the intricate web of transactions. But the amounts, Julian? This is millions. Millions of dollars. Where in God's name was it all going? Here's where it gets truly disgusting, Julian said, his jaw tight. He pulled up another document, another piece of the ugly puzzle. Izzy Monet isn't just his mistress, Alara. She's been running a sophisticated investment scheme through her so-called lifestyle blog, targeting small-time celebrities, social media influencers, people with more followers than financial sense, convincing them to invest in what they thought was an exclusive, high-return, legitimate fund. A Ponzi scheme, Alara breathed, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. The oldest scam in the book, dressed up in a glamorous, modern disguise. And Marcus, her husband, the man she had loved and trusted for over a decade, had been funding it. With stolen company money. Which means, Julian continued, his honey-colored eyes meeting hers, a grim understanding passing between them, that when this whole thing inevitably falls apart, and believe me, Alara, it will fall apart, Marcus isn't just looking at a messy divorce, he's looking at serious federal charges. The SEC is already investigating Thorne Industries. It's only a matter of time. Alara stood, pacing the small office, despite the persistent ache in her ribs, her mind reeling. The divorce settlement offer from Gideon Blackwood, it wasn't about generosity, it was about damage control. Marcus hadn't been trying to be kind. He'd been trying to buy her silence, to lock her into a non-disclosure agreement before this financial time bomb detonated. Before she, Alara Vance, one of the sharpest legal minds in Port Bellamy, figured out the true extent of his crimes. The sheer, unmitigated gall of it was breathtaking. But what now? What was her next move in this high-stakes game she hadn't even known she was playing? The weight of that slim manila file left by Julian Frost like a ticking time bomb felt immense in Alara's hands. What secrets did it hold? And more importantly, what would those secrets demand of her? A woman already battered by betrayal and grappling with a high-risk pregnancy. She'd stared at it for what felt like an eternity in her hospital room, a strange mixture of dread and a lawyer's insatiable curiosity warring within her. Now, back in the oppressive grandeur of her Port Bellamy Victorian home, a house that echoed with Marcus's lies, the time for passive contemplation was over. Action was required. But what action? Could she even trust Julian, her supposed rival? Resignation. The word itself tasted like ash in her mouth, yet simultaneously it sparked a defiant fire. To resign from Henderson, Albright & Finch, the prestigious law firm where she'd clawed her way to near partnership, felt less like a defeat and more like unsheathing a sword she hadn't realized she still possessed. 12 years of her life poured into that firm. 12 years of ambition, sacrifice, and relentless dedication. All for what? to be deemed inconvenient the moment her personal life imploded. The email from Henderson himself, all polite concern masking a clear ultimatum, still stung. But Sarah's words echoed, "Are you inconvenient? Or are you finally becoming inconvenient to people who benefited from your convenience?" Damn right she was. With a newfound, albeit fragile resolve, Alara drafted her resignation letter. It was short, professional, and devoid of the emotional turmoil that roiled beneath the surface. No explanations, no apologies, just a clean, decisive break. As she hit send, a strange sense of lightness, almost giddiness, washed over her. The first step. But what was next? An idea, audacious and terrifying, began to take root. A new firm, her firm. Not a sprawling corporate behemoth like Henderson, Albright and Finch, but something leaner, meaner, with a clear, unwavering purpose. To fight for the underdog, for the victims of fraud, for those whose lives had been shattered by the kind of sophisticated financial deceit Marcus had apparently mastered. Argentis Legal. The name came to her in a flash, a fusion of argent for silver, a symbol of clarity and truth, an aegis for protection, a shield for the vulnerable. Yes, that felt right, but she couldn't do it alone. She needed a partner, someone with experience in class action lawsuits, someone as tenacious and uncompromising as she was. Viviana "Vivi" Rain, a firebrand civil rights attorney based in Colombia, known for her take-no-prisoners approach and her unwavering commitment to justice. Alara had crossed paths with Vivi once, years ago, on a pro bono case. She'd been impressed, to say the least. Could Vivi be persuaded to join forces? It was a long shot, but Alara had to try. She made the call. And to her astonishment, Vivi Rain, after a characteristically blunt and probing conversation, was interested. Very interested. "Vance," Vivi had said, her voice crackling with energy, "I like your style, and I hate these white-collar parasites. Let's talk specifics." Hope, a fragile but persistent seedling, began to unfurl in Alara's chest. Meanwhile, the SEC investigation into Thorne Industries, spurred by the anonymous tip Alara and Julian had carefully orchestrated, was gaining momentum. Whispers turned into rumors, rumors into headlines. Port Bellamy, a city that thrived on gossip and scandal, was abuzz, and predictably, the fallout began. Izzy Monet, it turned out, had friends in low places, or rather, in high-circulation local media. Port Bellamy's most salacious news blog, the Port City Tattler, began running a series of articles painting Marcus Thorne as a misunderstood visionary, a victim of a collapsing market, and perhaps a vengeful, scorned wife. Alara Vance, the brilliant but cold attorney, was subtly, skillfully portrayed as the orchestrator of his downfall, a woman driven by jealousy and a desire for revenge. The narrative was as predictable as it was infuriating. The comments section, naturally, was a cesspool of public opinion, a battlefield where anonymous trolls and self-proclaimed experts dissected Alara's life, her marriage, even her pregnancy. Did they know she was pregnant? Probably. Nothing stayed secret for long in Port Bellamy. Alara, however, refused to be drawn into the mudslinging. Let them talk. Let them speculate. She had bigger fish to fry. The truth, she knew, had a way of eventually clawing its way to the surface, no matter how deeply it was buried. One rainy afternoon, as Alara was sketching out a business plan for Argentis Legal, the doorbell rang again. Her heart leaped into her throat. Not Blackwood again. Please, not Blackwood. It was Marcus. He looked haunted. His expensive suit hung loose on his frame, the shadows under his eyes a stark testament to sleepless nights and a gnawing fear. The confident, arrogant man she had confronted in the hospital was gone, replaced by a ghost of his former self. He looked, for the first time in a very long time, truly vulnerable. "Alara," he began, his voice hoarse, desperate. "You have to stop this. Please, the SEC, the investigation, it's not what you think. Izzy, the money, I can explain everything." Alara stood in the doorway, a silent, unyielding sentinel. She didn't invite him in. The scent of his familiar cologne, a scent that had once made her heart flutter, now turned her stomach. "Explain, Marcus?" she said, her voice dangerously calm. "Like you explained where you were that night at the Mariner's Rest? Or how about you explain the offshore accounts? The shell corporations? The investor money that lined Izzy Monet's pockets while their life savings vanished into thin air? Explain the lives you've ruined, Marcus. Go on, I'm listening." His desperation was palpable, a suffocating blanket in the damp afternoon air. "I did it for us, Alara. For our future. To build something great." "Our future?" Alara's laugh was a short, sharp, bitter sound. Everything you built, Marcus, was a lie. And the worst part? The truly, devastatingly ironic part? I would have helped you. If you'd come to me when things started going wrong, when the pressure mounted, I would have fought for you. I would have used every ounce of my legal skill, every connection I had, to protect you. But you didn't trust me. You chose her. You chose lies. And now, she said, her voice hardening, now you have to live with those choices. Alara, please, he pleaded, his eyes glistening with unshed tears. Were they real, or just another calculated performance? It was impossible to tell anymore. It's Mrs. Vance to you, Marcus, she corrected him, her tone glacial. Or better yet, Counselor Vance, because that's who I am now. A lawyer who is about to make damn sure that you and Izzy Monet face justice for every single life you've destroyed, for every dream you've shattered. She stepped back, her hand instinctively, protectively, covering her still small bump. Don't come here again, Marcus. Any further communication can go through our respective attorneys. And with that, she closed the door on his protests, on his pleas, on 12 years of a life that had turned out to be nothing more than a beautiful, elaborate fraud. Her hands, she noted with a strange sense of detachment, were perfectly steady as she turned the deadbolt. The storm inside her hadn't abated, but now it had a direction, a purpose. The grand jury indictment hearing for Marcus Thorne and Izzy Monet was a media circus. The federal courthouse in downtown Port Bellamy hummed with a frenetic, almost predatory energy. Journalists, cameras flashing, microphones thrust forward, jostled for position. Victims of the Ponzi scheme, their faces etched with a mixture of anger and a desperate hope for justice, filled the public gallery. Curious locals, drawn by the scandal that had rocked Port Bellamy to its core, whispered and craned their necks. Alara, now 20 weeks pregnant, her charcoal gray maternity suit, a stark professional statement, sat in the front row, flanked by Julian Frost on one side and Sarah Dubois on the other. Their presence was a silent bulwark against the stares, the whispers, the palpable animosity that seemed to radiate from certain corners of the courtroom. They're saying she orchestrated the whole thing, you know, a voice murmured from 2 rows back, just loud enough for Alara to hear. The wife set him up because she found out about the affair. I heard the pregnancy isn't even his, another whispered, the words a venomous dart. Alara's hand tightened on her leather portfolio, her knuckles white. The baby, as if sensing her tension, kicked sharply, a tiny, insistent reminder of what was truly at stake. Ignore them, Julian had whispered earlier, his shoulder brushing hers in a subtle gesture of support. Focus on what matters. And he was right. What mattered now was justice. The side door of the courtroom opened, and Marcus entered with his legal team. He'd lost more weight, his expensive suit hanging even looser on his diminished frame. His eyes, haunted and pleading, found Alara's immediately. She met his gaze, her own unyielding, unreadable. Behind him, Izzy Monet walked in, a vision in a designer dress, her makeup flawless, a carefully crafted image of innocent victimhood. All rise. The proceedings began with the formal reading of the charges: wire fraud, securities fraud, money laundering. The list went on, each charge another nail in the coffin of Alara's old life, another brick in the foundation of her new one. She listened with a lawyer's ear as the federal prosecutor methodically, damningly presented the evidence. Much of it gathered from the anonymous tip she and Julian had so carefully compiled. During a brief recess, as Alara was sorting through some of Marcus's remaining personal effects from their home, items his lawyer had requested, her fingers brushed against something small and hard at the bottom of a dusty box of old university textbooks. A locket, small, antique, made of tarnished silver, intricately engraved with a design she didn't recognize. Her heart gave a strange lurch. It wasn't hers, and it certainly wasn't something Izzy Monet, with her penchant for flashy modern jewelry, would ever wear. Curious, she pressed the tiny clasp. It sprang open, revealing a miniature, faded portrait of a woman. A beautiful woman, with sad eyes and a wistful smile, someone Alara had never seen before. Who was she? And what was her connection to Marcus? A cold knot formed in Alara's stomach. Another secret? Another betrayal? Just how many lives had Marcus Thorne been living? She snapped the locket shut, the tarnished silver suddenly feeling cold against her skin, and tucked it deep into her pocket. Another unanswered question, in a life that had become a tangled web of them. The courtroom buzzed back to life, and then the bombshell. Izzy Monet's attorney approached the bench, a smug, self-satisfied smirk playing on his lips. "Your Honor," he announced, his voice ringing with theatrical importance, "in light of new evidence, my client, Miss Isabelle Monet, wishes to cooperate fully with the prosecution." The courtroom erupted. "Furthermore," he continued, relishing the drama, "Monet has documentation, irrefutable documentation, proving that Mr. Marcus Thorne was the sole architect and mastermind of this unfortunate scheme, long before their personal relationship even began." Marcus's head snapped up, his face a mask of stunned disbelief, then pure, unadulterated betrayal. The irony, Alara thought with a grim, detached amusement, was almost too perfect. Izzy Monet, the femme fatale, the glamorous grifter, was cutting a deal, throwing Marcus under the bus to save her own skin. "She's good," Julian murmured beside her, his voice low and appreciative of the legal maneuver. "Very good." The federal prosecutor stood, his expression carefully neutral. "The government is prepared to accept Miss Monet's cooperation, Your Honor, in exchange for reduced charges." Chaos, pure, unadulterated chaos, erupted in the gallery. Marcus's attorneys huddled around him, their faces grim, whispering urgently. Izzy Monet, meanwhile, kept her eyes fixed forward, her posture perfect, her expression a carefully constructed mask of serene innocence. But Alara, her eyes missing nothing, saw the slight, almost imperceptible tremor in her perfectly manicured hands, the only sign that her composure was cracking. As the judge called for order, a strange, almost unnerving sense of calm settled over Alara. The baby moved again, a gentle, reassuring flutter. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice. Not just for her, but for all the victims, for all the lives Marcus and Izzy had so carelessly, so callously destroyed. During the next recess, as the media frenzy outside the courthouse reached fever pitch, Marcus's lead attorney, a portly man with an air of perpetual unease, approached their small group. "Mrs. Vance," he began, his voice hesitant. "Mr. Thorne, my client, he wishes to speak with you, privately." Before Julian or Sarah could object, Alara found herself nodding. "5 minutes," she said, her voice surprisingly steady. "In the conference room, with witnesses present." What could he possibly have to say now after all this? What new lie, what new manipulation was he about to attempt? The courthouse conference room, all polished mahogany and hushed tones, felt like a tomb. And Marcus Thorne, slumped at the head of the massive table, looked like its primary and increasingly desperate occupant. Gone was the swagger, the easy charm, the aura of invincibility he'd always worn like a bespoke suit. In its place was a man defeated. His shoulders bowed, his eyes hollow pits of despair. Gideon Blackwood, his portly attorney, hovered near the door, looking distinctly uncomfortable, while Julian Frost and Serafina Dubois flanked Alara, a silent, formidable show of support. 5 minutes. That's all she'd agreed to. 5 minutes for Marcus to say whatever it was he felt compelled to say before the full weight of the federal justice system came crashing down upon him. What could possibly be said? Could any words bridge the chasm of betrayal that now yawned between them? "I'm sorry, Alara," Marcus began, his voice raspy, barely audible. For everything." He paused, his gaze fixed on the polished surface of the table, unable to meet her eyes. I never meant to get caught." A flicker of something, contempt, amusement, crossed Alara's face. Even now, even in the face of utter ruin, his primary regret was not the devastation he'd caused, but the simple fact of his apprehension. Astonishing. "Or to hurt all those people whose lives you destroyed, Marcus?" she asked, her voice icily calm, each word a precisely aimed dart. "The ones who trusted you with their life savings, their dreams, their futures? Did you mean to hurt them?" He flinched, finally looking up, his eyes pleading. I meant to build something great. For us, Alara, for our child." He reached across the table, his hand outstretched, a desperate, pathetic gesture. She didn't move, didn't even acknowledge it. "Izzy Monet was a mistake," he continued, his voice cracking. "The money, it was a mistake. It spun out of control. Please, Alara, help me fix this. For our baby. We can fix this." Alara felt a profound, weary sadness wash over her. He still didn't get it. Even now, with his world crumbling around him, he still didn't truly understand the magnitude of his betrayal, the depth of the wounds he'd inflicted. "You still don't get it, do you, Marcus?" she said, her voice soft, yet imbued with an unshakable resolve. She stood carefully, one hand resting protectively on her belly, the gentle curve now more pronounced at 34 weeks. This isn't about us anymore. There is no us. This is about right and wrong, actions and consequences. The Marcus Thorne I married, the man I loved, or at least the man I thought I loved, would have understood that. He would have taken responsibility. "What do you want from me, Alara?" he whispered, his voice raw with a despair that for the first time felt almost genuine. "What can I possibly do?" "Nothing," she said, the word devoid of anger, of bitterness, of any lingering emotion save a profound, irrevocable finality. "I don't want anything from you, Marcus, except what the law demands. Restitution for your victims, every last cent, accountability for your choices, and a clean, simple, uncontested divorce." She turned to leave, then paused at the door, her gaze meeting his one last time. "Our child," she said, her voice softening almost imperceptibly, "will know the truth someday. The whole truth. Make sure, Marcus, that when that day comes, you've given them something, anything, worth remembering about their father. Something other than this catastrophic failure." And with that, she walked out, leaving him alone in the tomb-like silence of the conference room, the weight of his choices pressing down on him like the lid of a coffin. Back in the main courtroom, Izzy Monet's deal was formally accepted by the judge. Her cooperation, her willingness to testify against Marcus, had significantly reduced her own culpability. She would still face prison time, of course. Her irrefutable documentation hadn't absolved her entirely, but it would be a fraction of what Marcus was now facing. He was, to put it mildly, facing serious, life-altering charges. The kind that didn't just end careers. They ended lives as they were known. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal maneuvering, plea negotiations, and the relentless, grinding wheels of the federal justice system. Argentis Legal, Alara's fledgling law firm, was officially launched amidst the chaos, its small temporary office space a hive of activity. The class action lawsuit against Thorne Industries and its associated shell companies, spearheaded by Alara and the formidable Viviana Vivi Rain, quickly gained traction. Victims, emboldened by Alara's courage and Vivi's reputation, came forward in droves, their stories a heartbreaking chorus of shattered trust and financial ruin. Argentis Legal, almost overnight, represented over 40 individuals, with estimated damages climbing into the tens of millions. The fight for restitution had begun. The victim impact statements during Marcus's trial were grueling. One by one, ordinary people, retirees who'd lost their pensions, young families who'd seen their college funds evaporate, small business owners whose dreams had been decimated, stood before the court and spoke of the devastation Marcus Thorne and Izzy Monet had wrought. Their voices, raw with pain and anger, painted a vivid, damning portrait of greed, deception, and the catastrophic human cost of white-collar crime. Alara, now heavily pregnant, her body aching, her spirit weary but unbent, attended every single day of the trial. She sat in the gallery, a silent, watchful presence, her hand resting on her prominent belly, a constant, tangible reminder of the new life that was intertwined with this devastating end. Each story, each tear, each shattered dream fueled her resolve. This was why she'd started Argentis Legal. This was why she had to keep fighting. For them, for her child, for herself. One afternoon, during a particularly harrowing day of testimony, as Alara stepped out of the courtroom for a much-needed breath of fresh air, she was approached by a figure she hadn't expected to see. Dr. Eris Thorne. The doctor who had treated her in the hospital, the woman whose shared surname with Marcus had initially sparked a flicker of unease in Alara's mind. Dr. Thorne looked anguished, her usually composed features etched with a deep personal pain. "Mrs. Vance, Alara," she began, her voice trembling slightly. I had to tell you. I'm so incredibly sorry." Alara looked at her, confused. "Sorry for what, doctor?" Dr. Thorne took a deep breath, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. "Marcus Thorne, he's my cousin. My estranged cousin. We haven't spoken in years, not since he became the man he is today. I had no idea, absolutely no idea, what he was involved in, what he was doing." Her voice broke. "Treating you in the hospital, knowing now what he did to you, to your baby, and being a Thorne myself, I can't tell you how ashamed, how horrified I am. I should have known, I should have suspected." The revelation, so unexpected, so personal, hit Alara with the force of another physical blow. Marcus had a cousin who was a doctor at Port Bellamy General, a cousin he'd never mentioned, a cousin who had treated his critically injured, pregnant wife, completely unaware of the familial connection. It added another, almost surreal layer to Marcus's betrayal, another testament to the compartmentalized, deceitful life he had been leading. But it also, strangely, brought a measure of relief. Dr. Eris Thorne wasn't a co-conspirator, not another pawn in Marcus's sordid game. She was just another victim in her own way of his duplicity. Alara reached out, her hand briefly touching the doctor's arm. "It's not your fault, Dr. Thorne," she said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "You couldn't have known. Thank you for telling me." The day of Marcus's sentencing arrived, heavy and gray, the sky over Port Bellamy, mirroring the somber mood in the packed federal courtroom. Marcus Thorne, looking like a hollow shell of the confident, charismatic businessman who had once commanded boardrooms and charmed society, rose to face the judge. His expensive suit, once a symbol of his power and success, now hung loose on his slumped shoulders. When he turned to address the court, his voice, when it finally came, was cracked, broken. "I've spent every day since my arrest," he began, his hands gripping the podium so tightly his knuckles were white, "trying to understand how I became this person, how I betrayed not just my wife, Alara, and my unborn child, but dozens of innocent people who trusted me, who believed in me." He paused, swallowing hard, his gaze sweeping over the faces in the courtroom. The victims, their eyes burning into him. His former colleagues, their expressions a mixture of pity and contempt. And Alara, her face impassive, her eyes unreadable. "There's no excuse," he continued, his voice gaining a shred of its former strength, though now laced with a despair that felt chillingly real. "No justification for what I've done. I can only say that I am profoundly, deeply sorry, and that I accept whatever punishment this court deems appropriate." The judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman with steel gray hair and eyes that missed nothing, studied him over her reading glasses, her expression unyielding. "Mr. Thorne," she began, her voice cutting through the tense silence of the courtroom, "your crimes were not merely breaches of financial trust. You preyed upon people's hopes, their dreams for a better future. You used your position of privilege, your education, your charisma to orchestrate a sophisticated scheme that has devastated countless lives, stolen futures, and eroded the very fabric of trust in our financial institutions." Alara felt the baby kick, a sharp, insistent movement, as if sensing the gravity of the moment, this culmination of months of pain, betrayal, and a relentless pursuit of justice. This child, her child, who had been present in utero for every agonizing moment of this journey, was now, in a way, a silent witness to its resolution. "Taking into account your eventual, albeit late, cooperation with the authorities," the judge declared, her voice resonating with the full weight of the law, "and the restitution agreement that has been put in place, though it can never truly compensate for the emotional and financial devastation you have caused, this court sentences you, Marcus Alastair Thorne, to 12 years in federal prison. This will be followed by 5 years of supervised release." 12 years. A stunned murmur rippled through the gallery. 12 years. One for each year of their marriage. The symmetry, stark and brutal, wasn't lost on Alara. As the bailiffs moved to lead a now visibly trembling Marcus away, he caught her eye one last time. In that fleeting moment, she saw not the monster who had betrayed her, not the architect of a massive financial fraud, but someone she had once loved. Someone who had, somewhere along the way, lost his way so completely, so catastrophically that he had become unrecognizable even to himself. She gave him a small, almost imperceptible nod. Not forgiveness, not yet. Perhaps not ever. But acknowledgement. An ending. A full stop to a chapter of her life that had been filled with far too much pain. Outside the courthouse, the media scrum was in full frenzy. Viviana Rain, ever the consummate professional, was already addressing the reporters, her voice clear and strong, outlining the significance of the sentence, the victory for the victims, the ongoing fight for full restitution that Argentus Legal would continue to wage. Alara, however, slipped away from the crowd, needing a moment, needing air, needing something. Julian was by her side instantly, his hand lightly on her elbow as she navigated the imposing courthouse steps, her body heavy, her her spirit even heavier, despite the verdict. "You okay, Alara?" he asked, his honey-colored eyes, those eyes that had once sparred with hers across a courtroom, now filled with a deep, unwavering concern. She took a deep breath, the cool afternoon air filling her lungs. "I'm thinking," she admitted, her voice quiet, "about how to tell our daughter about this someday. How to explain that her father isn't a monster. Just a man who made terrible, devastating choices." "You'll find the right words, Alara," Julian said, his hand brushing hers, a fleeting touch that sent an unexpected warmth through her arm. "You always do." But before she could respond, before she could even process the gentle reassurance in his touch, a sharp, searing pain made her gasp. She grabbed the cold stone railing of the courthouse steps for support, her knuckles turning white, the world suddenly tilting on its axis. "Alara?" Julian's voice sharpened with alarm, his hand instantly on her arm, steadying her. I'm fine," she started to say, but another contraction, fiercer this time, undeniable, ripped through her, stealing her breath, making her cry out. This wasn't Braxton Hicks. This was real. Sarah, who had been deftly handling a particularly persistent reporter, appeared at her side as if by magic, her usual calm replaced by a look of authoritative concern. "Alara? How long have you been having contractions?" On and off since this morning," Alara gasped, clutching her belly. I thought they were Braxton Hicks. Stress, you know." Sarah's professional mask, the one she wore when dealing with her therapy clients, slipped firmly into place. "They're not Braxton Hicks, Alara," she said, her voice calm but brooking no argument. "You're in labor. Early labor, yes, but definitely labor." The world seemed to tilt and spin. Labor? Now? But it was too soon. She was only 34 weeks. Her baby. "But it's too soon," she cried, panic clawing at her throat. "Babies," Sarah said, her gaze unwavering, her strength a lifeline in Alara's sudden terror. "Come when they come, Alara. And this one, it seems, has decided that today is the day." She turned to Julian, who looked pale but remarkably steady. "Julian, get the car. We're going to the hospital. Now." The fight for justice had just been dramatically, terrifyingly interrupted by the even more urgent fight for life. The insistent, rhythmic beeping of the heart monitor had been replaced by a chaotic symphony of urgent, hushed voices and the clatter of medical equipment. The operating room was a blur of sterile blue, the bright overhead lights casting an almost ethereal glow on the scene, unfolding with terrifying speed. Alara felt herself drifting, caught in a strange liminal space between excruciating pain and a blessed, medication-induced numbness, an emergency C-section. Those were the words that had sliced through her panic, delivered with calm professionalism by Dr. Eris Thorne, Marcus's cousin. The irony wasn't lost on Alara, even now. Dr. Thorne was part of the surgical team, her earlier, heartfelt apology a quiet undercurrent to the focused intensity of her actions. Was it strange to find a sliver of comfort in the presence of a woman connected, however distantly, to the man who had destroyed her life? Perhaps, but in this moment of profound vulnerability, any port in a storm would do. Julian Frost, his face pale, but his grip on her hand surprisingly steady, was a constant presence by her side, his voice a low murmur of reassurance that anchored her to reality. Sarah, robed in surgical scrubs that looked strangely out of place against her usual bohemian elegance, observed from a corner, her eyes dark and watchful, offering a silent promise of strength. Alara wasn't alone. Not anymore. Could this be a new beginning, forged in the crucible of pain and betrayal? Through the blue surgical draping that separated her from the intricate life-saving work being done on her body, Alara could hear the medical team's calm, focused voices, a litany of medical terms and quiet instructions. Each second stretched into an eternity. Each beat of her own heart, still too fast, too erratic, echoed the fear that constricted her chest. Her baby, her tiny, innocent baby. Was she okay? Would she survive this premature, traumatic entry into a world that had already proven itself so cruel? And then, a sound, a cry. Not a weak, fragile whimper, but a strong, defiant, undeniably alive cry that cut through the clinical tension of the operating room, a sound more beautiful, more powerful than any symphony Alara had ever heard. "She's beautiful, Alara," Julian whispered, his voice thick with an emotion that made Alara's own eyes well with tears. "Small, but she's a fighter." Tears, hot and unexpected, slid down Alara's temples as they brought the baby to her, a tiny, perfectly formed human being, swaddled in a soft white blanket. Her daughter. So small, so fragile, yet radiating an almost palpable determination. They placed her against Alara's chest for just a fleeting moment, a precious, heart-stopping connection, before whisking her away to the waiting NICU team. That brief contact, skin against skin, was enough. It was everything. Aurora, Alara whispered, the name coming to her with a sudden, intuitive clarity. Aurora Rory Vance. Because, she looked at Julian, her voice choked with emotion. Because she came to me in the darkness, but she brings nothing but light. Julian's lips brushed her forehead, a gentle, tender touch that spoke volumes, a silent promise of tomorrows that might be different from the ones she had once so meticulously planned, but somehow better, truer, stronger. As they wheeled her to recovery, the exhaustion finally claiming her, Alara thought about storms and strength, about the unexpected, often brutal ways life had of surprising you, of stripping you bare, just when you thought you had it all figured out. Her daughter had arrived early, yes, but maybe that was perfect too. One last poignant reminder that the best things in life, the things that truly mattered, didn't always follow your carefully laid plans. They came when they were meant to, often in the midst of chaos, bringing with them the messy, unpredictable, terrifyingly beautiful chance to begin again. 6 months later, the Port Bellamy summer painted the sky in brilliant, unapologetic shades of gold and pink. Alara stood in Rory's nursery, a sanctuary of soft grays and lavenders, watching her daughter sleep peacefully in her crib. Despite her premature arrival, Aurora Rory Vance had proven to be every bit the fighter Julian had proclaimed her to be. Now thriving at 7 months old, a perfect, intoxicating blend of strength and sweetness, with a captivating fuzz of dark curls and eyes that seemed to hold all the ancient wisdom in the world, she was Alara's everything. Her anchor, her hope, her reason. The nursery, once Marcus's sterile home office, a room that had echoed with his lies and deceptions, had been transformed. A hand-painted mural of a benevolent moon and a sky full of twinkling, friendly stars stretched across one wall, a breathtaking gift from one of Argentus Legal's first clients, a talented local artist whose gallery and life savings had been decimated by Marcus's Ponzi scheme, but who had since, with Alara and Vivi's help, begun to rebuild her life, her art, her dreams. It was a daily reminder of why Alara fought so hard. "She's finally asleep," Julian's whisper came from the doorway. He'd loosened his tie after a long, grueling day in court, but his eyes, those honey-colored eyes that now looked at Alara with such open affection, were bright with a recent victory. He looked happy, content. Something Alara was slowly, tentatively beginning to feel herself. Alara nodded, carefully, silently, stepping away from the crib. In the living room, she could hear the low, animated voices of Sarah